I've always been fascinated by corporate scandals and misconduct. In fact, I've spent a large chunk of my legal career both defending and pursuing people who have done the wrong thing. Yet I'm still intrigued as to how the culture of an organisation can either explicitly or unknowingly enable such misconduct to occur. Recently, I watched David Fincher's classic crime thriller, Seven. More than 25 years on, the film still packs a punch. It got me thinking about the 7 deadly sins and what role they can play in corporate culture. And by culture, I mean the way things are done around here. The 7 deadly sins originated from Christian theology in or about the 13th century. They were never contemplated for the business world. Yet, I think that they can help explain how some of the most memorable corporate scandals have unfolded. Let me tell you why. In theological terms, pride is considered the cardinal sin, the worst of the worst. Pride is about acting in one's self-interests rather than the best interests of the organisation. It's about making decisions that are driven by ego and overestimating one's ability. It manifests in not listening to your employees, your clients, and your team because there is nothing to see here or we know better. Pride is about not saying sorry, failing to admit to mistakes or wrongdoing, and making decisions that are driven by principle rather than being the right thing to do. Pride can create a win-at-all-costs culture. It is often said that pride comes before the fall. And in the case of Theranos, we are continuing to watch the failed silicon startup's epic fall from grace. Founded in 2003 by Elizabeth Holmes, a 19-year-old Stanford dropout, Theranos was seen as a unicorn. It promised to revolutionize the medical industry with breakthrough technology that could produce advanced blood testing with just the prick of a finger. That promise led Theranos to raise more than $700 million in venture capital, and at its peak, the company was valued at $9 billion. On its board were distinguished former US Secretaries of State and military leaders including Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, and Jim Mattis. In 2015, Holmes became the world's youngest female self-made billionaire. Yet, there was bad blood inside the lab, with Theranos employees and industry experts raising concerns as to the technology's capacity and accuracy. Meanwhile, Holmes continued to staunchly defend Theranos and her vision to change the world. Following several criminal and regulatory investigations, litigation, and a settlement with the SEC, in 2018, Theranos collapsed. It would seem that hubris finally got to Holmes, and she is currently on trial in the US, accused of defrauding investors and patients. Now, greed is the intense desire for wealth and material gain. Greed, in the words of Gordon Gekko, is good. Yet greed has the potential to create a profits above all else culture. Greed is about golden handshakes and parachutes, excessive bonuses, and fat cats. Greed can result in excessive risk-taking, cutting corners, unethical business practices, and putting profits ahead of people. It can also place unrelenting pressure on employees to do whatever it takes to achieve unrealistic sales targets. Such pressure led Wells Fargo employees to fraudulently open millions of fake customer accounts over a 14-year period. Customers were signed up for savings and checking accounts and given lines of credit they didn't want or need and often knew nothing about. The scandal tarnished Wells Fargo's brand, it led its CEO to resign, and resulted in the bank agreeing to pay a $3 billion settlement to settle a civil action and to resolve a criminal prosecution. Meanwhile, Australia's Banking Royal Commission revealed banks charging customers fees for no service and some banks continuing to charge dead customers fees for providing financial advice. When questions were asked as to how such misconduct was allowed to happen, the Commission found that the root cause was greed and the pursuit of short-term profit at the expense of basic standards of honesty. Gluttony, like greed, is about the desire for absolute excess. It's about overindulgence, overconsumption, and taking more than what you need. Gluttony can be excessive corporate spending on travel and entertainment and fine dining. It can also be about drawing an excessive salary and not sharing profits with the people who helped create them. At its worst, gluttony can lead to wage theft, money laundering, insider trading, corruption and fraud. As we saw with the release of the Panama, Paradise and Pandora Papers, gluttony can also lead global conglomerates and high net worth individuals to use offshore tax havens to maximise their profits. The International Monetary Fund estimates that tax havens collectively cost governments between $500 and $600 billion a year in lost corporate tax revenue. Now, while tax avoidance, unlike tax evasion, is not illegal, the schemes do have the potential to hide criminal activity, including terrorism financing and human rights abuses. Lust is more than inordinate sexual desire. Lust, like greed and gluttony, is about the hunger for money and power, the desire for market dominance, capital growth, investments, and high-level acquisitions. Lusting after impulsive big-dollar deals at the expense of the balance sheet can quickly render a company insolvent. Yet lust can also bring a company to its knees. Sexual harassment coupled with power imbalances and a culture of silence can literally destroy a company overnight. In 2017, numerous allegations of sexual misconduct against former Hollywood heavyweight Harvey Weinstein were made public. The next day, he was sacked by the board of the Weinstein Company, a company in which he co-founded and was the CEO. As allegations continued to be made against Weinstein from women across the world, the Me Too movement quickly gained momentum. And so did the rapid descent of the Weinstein Company. Its reputation had been decimated and its legal liabilities were mounting. Harvey Weinstein's legacy of lust for sex and power quickly crippled the company. In March 2018, just less than 6 months after the public allegations first arose, the Weinstein Company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Now, envy is about the insatiable desire for wanting something that you don't have. That desire can manifest in a whatever it takes culture. In a workplace, it can also be about taking the credit for the efforts of others and letting feelings of jealousy and insecurity cloud your judgment. It can be seeing colleagues as threats rather than collaborators. Envy is also often associated with the colour green, as in green with envy or the green-eyed monster. Ironically, it was Volkswagen's green and clean diesel vehicles which ultimately revealed a culture built on deception and fraud. In 2011, Volkswagen's CEO then announced the German car giant's goal to overtake Toyota and to dominate the global car industry. To do so, Volkswagen needed to increase its US sales and to also satisfy the Environmental Protection Authority's stringent fuel emissions regulations. It embarked on an aggressive marketing campaign that promoted its diesel vehicles as being environmentally friendly, fuel efficient, and high-performing. The strategy was a success and its US sales soared. Yet, while publicly, Volkswagen had promoted itself as the world's foremost innovator of clean diesel engine technology, behind the scenes lied a sophisticated scheme of fraud and deception. After persistently denying any wrongdoing, the smell of smoke soon turned to fire. In September 2015, Volkswagen admitted to rigging about 11 million diesel vehicles with technology engineered to cheat emissions testing. The car maker admitted that the decision to cheat on emissions tests was made more than a decade ago after they realised they could not meet clean US air standards legally. Volkswagen's misdeeds resulted in it reaching a $30 billion settlement with US authorities and facing further claims from across the world. Now, wrath is about anger, rage, and revenge. Acting out of hot-headedness will often put a company in hot water. Whistleblowers who call out wrongdoing and corporate misdeeds will often incur the wrath of the company scorned. In often a David versus Goliath scenario, whistleblowers frequently risk their reputation and livelihood in reporting corporate wrongdoing and misconduct. The early 2000s saw whistleblowers unearth some of the most significant accounting scandals in US history. Enron executives proved not to be the smartest guys in the room. Efforts to hide billions of dollars of bad debt by exploiting accounting loopholes led it to be declared bankrupt in 2001 and immortalised as the biggest audit failure. A year later, telecommunications company WorldCom was found to have inflated its assets by about $11 billion and recorded $3.8 billion in fraudulent accounting entries. Sharon Watkins, Enron's corporate development VP, and Cynthia Cooper, WorldCom's internal audit VP, were instrumental in exposing the corporate misconduct. Their actions paved the way for the introduction of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, and that same year Time magazine recognised them as Persons of the Year. And finally, sloth. Sloth is about laziness, inaction, inattention, complacency, falling asleep at the wheel, and not heeding to your risks. Sloth is an absence or a lack of governance and compliance. Sloth can also lead to inefficiencies, a lack of innovation, and not keeping an eye on your competitors. Yet, one of the greatest hazards posed by corporate complacency and a lack of governance is the impact it can have on an organisation's risk and safety culture. The explosion of the Deepwater Horizon oil rig in 2010 tragically resulted in the death of 11 crew members and injured 17 others. The explosion caused over 130 million gallons of crude oil to spew out into the Gulf of Mexico. It remains one of the worst environmental disasters in history. While BP was ultimately held responsible for the event, Transocean and Halliburton were also found to have contributed to the catastrophe. Some of the factors that were identified as contributing to the disaster included a lack of safety culture on the rig, a rush to complete the well, poor management decisions, poor risk management, numerous system deficiencies, and a failure to respond to critical indicators. The event cost BP dearly. In 2012, BP agreed with the US Department of Justice to pay a $4.5 billion criminal penalty, and in 2015, it agreed to a civil settlement in excess of $20 billion. A company's culture is critical to it achieving its strategic objectives, its financial performance, and long-term success. Good corporate culture takes time and effort to create. It requires buy-in from management and the executive, and a commitment from everyone across the organisation. As we have seen, the impacts caused by having a poor culture can be far-reaching and sometimes irreversible. Poor cultures can lead to financial loss, reputational damage, loss of market dominance, and legal liabilities. Having a strong corporate culture lies in being aware of your legal and ethical blind spots. It requires knowing how to manage pride, greed, gluttony, lust, envy, wrath, and sloth. In the corporate world, doing the right thing doesn't automatically bring success, But succumbing to the 7 deadly sins almost always leads to scandal and failure.